Hello again. I'm Eric Coleman, and I enjoy the privilege of serving as State Senator from the Second Senatorial District, representing the Second Senatorial District towns of Hartford, Bloomfield, and Windsor, Connecticut. I'm also privileged in that I am the host of this program, the Senate Reports, and I want to welcome all of you viewers to another edition of the Senate Reports. And today we have a very special treat for you because we have a special guest, and I would like to introduce to you, the viewers, Mr. Robert Watts, who will spend the next half hour with me talking about himself, his life, his career, his background, which I think all of you viewers will find extremely fascinating. So welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Watts.
Pleasure to be here, Senator.
So why don't I throw it to you and have you just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, flown here yesterday from Central California, near Yosemite National Park.
Well, you got here just in time to see some of Connecticut's snow.
So I'm really glad to be here and thankful to my good friend Bill Hosley, who lives here in Connecticut, who was a high school classmate of mine, who spoke so famously about you and your program and your show, and convinced me that this is where I should be on this day at this time. So I'm glad to be here.
Well, I want to acknowledge Bill Hosley too, because he was the one that indicated to me that you were making a trip this way, and that I would be losing out if I didn't get the chance to meet you and have some conversation with you.
Wonderful.
And, you know, we've been together for a few minutes prior to the start of the program, and Bill wasn't exaggerating. I find you to be a fascinating personality, and I'm glad that you could be here and participate as part of this show.
Thank you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm a humble guy, but I want to acknowledge that recommendation that Bill made. Bill's a fantastic human being. And I started talking to Bill about coming to the East Coast because I've written a new book called People Are Never the Problem. And then I talked to him about my most recent book, which is The Plastic Coated Leaf, which is a book of short stories and poems. And so that's what I'm on a tour for right now as we speak. As I mentioned before, I live in Central California. I don't know how many of your viewers know where that is, but I live near Yosemite National Park.
Oh, we certainly heard of Yosemite National Park.
Yes, and so that particular part of the United States is where we have the largest producer of produce in the world. And so I happen to be living in God's country right now. I enjoy it so much. I came to California, I think, 1978 to play for the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah.
I had been on the team with the New Orleans Saints prior to that, but a spinal cord injury had me sit out for a year. And so when I rehabilitated, Al Davis and John Madden got in touch with me to say, hey, would you be interested in trying again? And I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot. So I made the team, played for 2 years with the Raiders, 78, 79, and hurt my knee and went to Canada and played a year in Toronto. And hurt it again and had to have knee surgery up there. And I decided at that time that I didn't want to lose my life to football. And at the age of 27, I retired from the game.
What position were you playing?
I was an outside linebacker.
Okay.
Yeah. And
so let me take it back a little bit. Tell me and share with the viewers how you met Bill Hosley.
I met Bill at the Vermont Academy, Saxon River, Vermont, small private boarding school in the hills there in Saxon River. And at the time in 1969, Bill and I were freshmen together. Okay. And so, I mean, if you're old enough watching this show.
Now, Vermont Academy, if I remember correctly from our preliminary conversation, you're a New York guy.
I'm from the South Bronx.
Okay. Yeah. So how did you get from the South Bronx to Vermont Academy?
As I mentioned when we were talking before we went on the air, it's a providential scholarship. So it was a God scholarship. Okay. I fell off a horse at a sort of makeshift summer camp in Vermont, which was being organized and managed by a social worker named Jim Scholl, who lives in Massachusetts this day. And he really was giving some kids from the inner city an opportunity to get out of the city for the summer and teach us something about survival skills. And I guess with the intent of helping us also to connect better with our sense of self and develop self-confidence and get in touch with nature. And as a psychologist today, that was a tremendous opportunity, and it was the right strategy, actually, because it was empowering. You know, you get outside of your your normal environment, and you get into a real natural environment, and you get to see how you really are connected to the earth, and how in a lot of ways, you're just like the trees and the animals that are moving about, and that there is really no difference between you and the environment you're in. In fact, you are part of that environment. So that was transformative for me that summer. And it happened to be on that trip that a friend of his father's who owned some horses allowed us to ride the horses. And I took a ride on one of the horses and got thrown off a horse and was injured very severely in that accident. But I think God works in mysterious ways.
Was this a New York City guy's first experience riding a horse?
No, actually, it wasn't my first experience.
Okay, so you had some experience riding, but
I used
you
to
had
go
the
to
accident anyway.
Yeah, I used to ride horses in Van Cortlandt Park a couple of times as a little boy, you know. But that was the first time I was riding a horse unguided, unassisted, and we were going through trees and the wilderness. And so it wasn't on a trail, and it certainly was, I didn't have a guide, somebody leading the horse. So we went down a steep slope, and I, to this day, don't really remember what happened after that, because all I remember is being thrown off the horse, and I hit my head pretty severely, had a pretty severe concussion and a dislocated shoulder and a cracked rib and a dislocated pelvis. So I was in pretty bad shape. Of course, you know, someone who would own those horses would be liable. And so his lawyers, Mr. Moody, who's passed on now, his lawyers approached my mother while I was in the hospital and wanted to settle, obviously. And my mother was very adamant and I think a little upset that somebody would approach her that way. So she said, listen, you know, you were trying to help my son. Why would you think as a Christian woman I would want to sue you? Trying to do something good, right? So it allowed the opportunity to be presented to me, because he asked me what I wanted. Because since my mother didn't want anything, you know, what did I want? And I said, well, I'd like to go to the prep school I saw a couple of days ago, because we had been invited to a picnic at the school. And so I inquired about how could you get into the school from my counselor and all that. And he said, well, it's too expensive. You shouldn't even think about that, Robert. And you don't have the grades and all that, because I was illiterate.
You shared that with me. That's
I was illiterate.
Very personal.
I was
item that you shared with me.
I was in the 8th grade, and I was doing probably first, second grade, you know, math and reading at about the 2nd grade level. And I had been held back already about the 3rd grade.
So was it that this Mr. Moody fellow paid your tuition and room and board?
Yeah, well, yes, he did.
For you to attend how many years at Vermont Academy?
4 years.
Okay.
But he didn't pay all the 4 years.
Okay.
After the first 2 years, the first year I flunked everything, okay? Because I'm not even in a remedial program. They don't know what to do with a student like me. They had the ABC program that you're familiar with. So those students were handpicked. They were successful students in their high schools. And so I'm really an anomaly here. And so they didn't have any way to prepare themselves for me. And so I kind of fell through the cracks the first year, but I was reading and trying to figure out stuff on my own. So the second year I came back, they put me in somewhat of a remedial program, and I excelled out of that after the first semester. And then the second semester, then they mainstreamed me again, and I got C's. Then junior year, I was a B+ A student, and my senior year I was an A student. So it was transformative, powerful experience for me. I was a very accomplished athlete when I got there. So as a freshman, I excelled as a varsity athlete.
Was there some interest in keeping you as a part of the Vermont Academy school community because of your athletic ability?
Absolutely.
What'd you play?
Everything.
So when you say everything, I went to a prep school, as I shared with you myself, and I actually played 4 sports.
Okay, same here.
Football, baseball, basketball, and I ran track.
Same sports.
Okay.
Same sports. Well, I was a freshman. My first game against Mount Herman Academy.
I've heard of Mount Herman.
I scored 49 points, 15 rebounds, and 10 steals. I don't know how many assists I gave out that night. But that was my very first game as a freshman, right? So that's what they were dealing with. As a football player, I came there and I started at defensive end and at wide receiver as a freshman. And I was the fastest kid in the school.
Okay.
So I was fastest kid on the track team all the time I was there. And I became the New England shot put champion, 100-meter champion, 200-meter champion, hurdle champion.
Shot put, okay.
Yeah. I was a shot putter.
So you mentioned Mount Hermon. When I was in ABC, there was a guy named Richard Dozier. That was a basketball player. He probably would have been at Mount Hermon at the same time.
He was a senior, and I was a freshman.
Okay.
He was guarding me that night.
Really? When he scored 49 points?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought he was pretty good when we played pickup at Mount Hermon. Yeah. I'm sorry, at Dartmouth ABC. So if you scored 49 points against Dozier as a freshman, while he was a senior, you were an accomplished. You had to be an accomplished.
I grew up in the Bronx.
I hear you.
I was a basketball player first, foremost a basketball player. Boston College, I was on the
JV. Very impressive.
Well, I was on the JV basketball team in those days at Boston College. And I still own the record for the most points scored in the game. Yeah, against Rhode Island, I got 63. So I was a basketball player. Okay. Who ended up being a football player. So
did you start playing football at Vermont Academy or?
No, the first short story in this book is about playing Little League football in the Bronx when I was 10. Okay. I outgrew the league, so I couldn't play the second year. I got too big. They had a weight limit, and I just got too big. So that next year, I played when I was 12, I played in the 16 to 18-year age group.
At age 12?
Yeah. Okay. I was a defensive end on that team. Yeah. And they called it the Greystones in the Bronx. So, of course, I didn't have a birth certificate to prove I was 16. And no one asked any questions. They just allowed me to play. Wow. So I played on that team. And so that was my first exposure to, playing football with bigger guys. And so I held my own, but I was by no means a star. I mean, these are high school football players. So I was just kind of learning the game. Yeah. And I didn't pick it up again until I got to high school. There was no opportunity.
That was at Vermont Academy.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So I played basketball. I played baseball for a little while. I quit and just focused on track. And then I was a football player and a basketball player. And we had a football team went undefeated, and the basketball team was undefeated my senior year. I was captain of those teams.
Okay. So you mentioned in track and football, you said you were the fastest guy on the team.
Yeah.
I've never been blessed or gifted with speed. But I was a high jumper and a broad jumper. Wow. And I ran the hurdles. Awesome. You were saying you shot put. That was that's kind of unique.
I was the New England champion in shot put.
Fantastic. Yeah. You're a sprinter?
Yep. I was the New England champion in the 100 and the 200.
Okay.
And you can only do 3 events in those games. So I didn't run the hurdles, but I was undefeated in the hurdles. And Boston College, I anchored the New England record-breaking team, 4x110 team.
No kidding.
Yeah. And I ran in the NFL. I was coming out for the draft. I was the fastest linebacker in the country, one of the fastest defensive players in the country. I ran a 4.340, so I could run. That was my thing.
That's great.
I had a motor, and at about 220 pounds at 4.3 speed, that's a bullet. That causes damage.
So I'm at 4.3 speed. I'm surprised they didn't put you at a defensive back position.
Well, when I got drafted by the Saints, they moved me from linebacker to safety.
Okay.
So there you go. See, Hank Stram was my coach.
Be a coach. Huh?
You sure? It was a good call. He said, "I need you. I'd love to have you a linebacker, but I need a safety. And you'd be a prototype. You're running 4.3, you're 6'3", 220. I'm putting you at safety." So he moved me to safety.
So, I want to leave some time to talk about your book, but you went 4 years at Vermont Academy, and then, as I understand it, you graduated from there and went on to Boston College.
Yes.
And you continued your academic progress.
Yes.
And also continue to compete in athletics at Boston College.
Yes, yes.
You have that in common with the governor of the state of Connecticut.
Yes.
Dan Malloy is alumnus of Boston College.
Oh, really? What year did he graduate?
You know what? That I don't know.
Okay.
But I know I'm a few years older than he is, so it would probably have to have been after 73.
Okay. So then I was a graduate at Boston College in 77.
Okay.
So he may have been there. I don't know.
Could have been. I know.
If he was, he knows who I am.
Probably a big school community.
Yeah.
How many students at Boston
back
College?
then, I think we had about 9,000 students. It wasn't that big.
Yeah.
You know, what sports did he play? You know,
I don't know if he played any sports, to be honest with you. But
gotcha.
So 9,000 students. You probably crossed paths with him at some point in time.
Well, you know, as a student athlete,
he probably knew who you were.
Well, I'm sure of that. I'm not saying
your name.
I'm not bragging, but you went to Boston College when I was there. You knew who I was, right? So I was one of Boston College's first defensive All-Americans. So, and I was drafted high, and I played in the Senior Bowl and East West Shrine game, those kinds of, you know, pageantries. And you know, I was a noted student too. My freshman year, I held a 3.38 GPA. I had a number of different injuries that distracted me from my academics, but I never went below a 2.8, 2.9, you know, as a student. But I had spinal surgery at Boston College. I had a detached retina at Boston College.
No kidding.
I broke my ankle at Boston College. I mean, you know,
all playing football.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a lot of things to keep me.
How was your recuperation? Not to cut you off, but your recuperation from the injury that got you to Vermont Academy, falling off the horse?
I never recuperated from it. I had back problems all through high school. You know, reason why we didn't win the state championship.
49 points against Dozier.
Oh yeah.
Having never recuperated.
I'm sure hoping that was the person.
Yeah.
Whoever was he a guard?
I'm hoping it was him.
Was he a guard?
He was probably a guard.
Well, if he was there in 1969, it was him.
Okay.
So whoever was guarding me, I remember a fair-skinned brother.
Yeah.
Short, low afro.
Yeah.
About 5'10", 11, something like that.
Yeah.
And I got 49 on him.
Okay.
Whoever that was.
You have my respect. So we're coming up on a break.
Okay.
Why don't we take the break and then we'll come back and we'll continue the conversation.
All right.
Icy Sunset Jazz in the City, a jazzy, sultry evening with an arts exhibition. April the 25th at the Hartford Hilton Hotel, 315 Trumbull Street, Hartford, Connecticut. It's 4 hours from 5:30 to 9:30. Dress code is City Chic. For more information, call 646-462-1461. That's 646-462-1461. Finding Peace Campaign Corporation, in association with Lady Flavor Radio Network, presents the 2015 Women's Empowerment Conference with a tribute to Melba Moore, April the 18th. For more information or tickets, contact Tina Williams at 860-830-5944 or visit ladyflavor.com.
Hello again, and welcome back to this episode of the Senate Reports. And for the last 15 minutes, we've been engaged in fascinating conversation with Mr. Robert Watts, who is here in the Hartford area visiting and sharing some stories about his life and his career. We've learned that he was a student at Vermont Academy in Vermont and went from there on to Boston College. He was an excellent athlete and had some challenges initially at Vermont Academy academically, but has apparently overcome those challenges, went on to Boston College, where he continued to excel academically. And we wanted to reserve some time just to highlight some of the work that he's done. He's an author, a poet, and he's penned this book, which is entitled The Plastic Coated Leaf, an assembly of poems and short stories written by Mr. Robert Watts Jr. And for those of you who are in the Hartford area, Mr. Watts will be visiting the Passages Gallery. The proprietor there is Rosita Dobson. So if you have some time, and even if you're not a frequenter of Passages Gallery, the fact that Mr. Watts will be there, is it today that you'll be there? Yes, this evening at 6 p.m. Stop in. It'll be time worth spending getting to know Mr. Watts and hearing him talk about his work, and particularly this book, The Plastic Coated Leaf, as well as I'm sure he'll get into sharing some of his life experiences with those who are in the audience. But yet, Mr. Watts, back to you. Tell us, how did The Plastic Coated Leaf come about?
Well, the honest story is that I wrote this book over the last 40 some odd years. The first poem in this book, well, one of the poems in this book, I wrote in 1969 when I was a freshman learning to read in high school. And it was published by my school paper.
Okay.
And so that inspired me because it gave me an expression, a way to express myself that was some way different than I had been expressing myself through athletics. So I didn't really depend on the physicality to be my only means by which I communicated with the world. Mm-hmm. And what a powerful transformative experience that was, to have my headmaster engage me walking across campus one afternoon with just so much excitement that it just took me back. And I was confused as to what he was excited about. And he said, "Congratulations on getting published." And I didn't know what published meant.
Wow.
So it's like, published, okay. Is that good? You know,
this was while you were in high school?
I was a freshman.
Okay.
My first semester. When I couldn't read or write, I just kind of scratched a few things down and gave it to somebody. And next thing I know, it was published.
What was the theme of that poem?
It's called What a Black Child Awakes to. And it talks about, you know, my urban experience. I'll read it for you. Read it if you want me to. Sure. For your readers, your listeners. It's called A Poor Child and What He Awakes to. A poor child awakes to place his foot, the victim of a cold, untouched virgin floor. In a room of rats and cracks, there's a bed beside the wall. In it, there's a hole that carries the strength of a storm.
Wow.
And so I scratched that on a piece of paper, and they edited it and did the grammatical thing to it. Mm-hmm. And
that was some 40 years ago?
Yeah.
That was first
1969.
Written? Okay.
I'm 60 years old.
Okay.
So I was 14 going on 15. And I never had a greater feeling. I've been chasing that feeling ever since. And it had nothing to do with sports. And anybody who knows
about the feeling of having gotten published.
Well, the feeling of having been identified and associated with something other than my physicality.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And at the age of 14, I was pursuing that. Right. And to have it presented to me in such a furtive way was powerful. I mean, I had my headmaster, mm-hmm. you know, mm-hmm. coming to me with such joy was powerful.
And he knew the news before you knew.
Absolutely.
It. Okay.
And it meant that much to him. I mean, I grew up without a father, so I didn't have any men other than maybe a few coaches here and there, just to give them credit. I mean, they mm-hmm. were pivotal in my life, but not this experience and not for this reason. And that got integrated and internalized. And I was already motivated to get an education, but that taught me what the reward could be. I could be recognized for something far more than just being an athlete.
So let me ask this question. During your time in the NFL or even at Boston College, where you were sacking quarterbacks and, you know, intercepting passes and stuff, were you still writing poetry?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You have poems in here. A good number of these poems are written in the early 70s when I was a college student.
Okay.
Yeah, quite. I would say a third of the book is I call it the reflections of a collegian, you know, and what I was writing about at that time, what I was feeling and thinking about, had nothing to do with sports.
I hear you.
Social issues, emotional challenges I was having, fears and anxieties that I was dealing with, love loss.
Yeah, I could write a few poems about that. So myself.
I'm sure we all could. I'm sure we all could if we have the courage to.
So what'd you major in at college? Was it?
I started off
like
as a nursing
English
major.
Nursing?
I started off as a nursing major.
Okay.
But the injuries got in the way. I couldn't keep up, you know. And so I transferred to speech and communication studies.
Gotcha.
And graduated, did well in that. And then I got my master's in speech and communication studies. And in graduate school, I focused on rhetoric and general semantics, little study of cross-cultural communication.
Was graduate school at Boston College as well?
No, San Francisco State University.
Yeah, okay.
And then I had a bout of cancer. I was teaching, I was a professor, and I got sick. And so I had to go to Stanford Medical Center and get a year-long treatment for lymphoma. And at that time, they had given me a full scholarship from the state of California to get my doctorate. And I had to give the scholarship back.
Oh my goodness.
And when I got healthy, they offered it to me again. And I started the program again and found out that I had, you know, post-treatment depression. And so I couldn't keep the scholarship. I had to give it back. And I had three children. And so I was just trying to survive at that point. So you have poems about that.
Yeah.
And God being who he is allowed me to get through that storm. And about 5 years later, I said, about 10 years later, I said, I'm going back to school. So at 50, I went back and got my doctorate degree.
Excellent.
In clinical psychology. So today I'm a practicing clinical psychologist and an organizational psychologist that do a lot of work in municipalities and Fortune 500 companies.
Okay. So I'm tempted to ask the question, I know you're very proud of the very first piece that you wrote.
Yes.
What's your next favorite piece?
The poem I wrote for my mother the year she died, her last Mother's Day poem. I'll read that for you if you like.
Please.
Let me see if I can locate that. Oh, see, Mama, you wanted me to find it right there. Look at that. She's still at work. It's called Today.
Need glasses?
Yeah, I don't think I have them with me. But anyway, I'll get through it. Today, from my seat in first class, I stared out the window and thought of you. Today, I felt the tenderness of your love and the way you strengthened me with your courage. Today, I reflected on how you always encouraged me to have a vision by living yours amidst a constellation of negativity, and how you blessed my ambition and coached me to stand tall under the weight of the world. Today, I thought how wonderful the world is because you are in it. I shudder to think what it would have meant to be a child without a mother like you. You stood up for me before I could stand for myself. When my father became invisible, when I thought I was the ugliest little black boy in the world, when my body broke and professional football pushed me aside, when the fans stopped calling my name, when cancer robbed me of my innocence, when I struggled to find my way through recovery. I survived because you were in the world, because your faith in me is insurmountable. Today, I thank God for my eyesight, because I can see the most beautiful woman who has ever lived. Today, I thank God for my hearing. I so depend on hearing you tell me that every night you pray for me and that you love me. Today, I thank God for my sensitivity to touch. I meditate on the times you passed and cupped my head with your large, delicate hands. Today, I thank God for my heart, for it is there that I feel your presence the most. I love you, your son. Happy Mother's Day. Robert, October 18th, 2008.
Very powerful. As you're reading it, you had a mother like I had a mother. And I felt could probably never express it like that. I would have the same sort of feelings toward my mother that you've expressed in that piece that you wrote.
Glad I could do that for you, brother.
I appreciate it too. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome.
You're from California. You're
from the South Bronx.
From the South Bronx.
I live in California.
You're here in Connecticut today by way of California.
Yes.
We know that you're making the stop at Passages Gallery. Any other appointments that we can highlight?
Well, I'll be leaving Connecticut on the 4th to do a reading in Harlem on 5th Avenue and 135th Street, I think it is.
Okay.
I'll be there for that day, and then I move on to Philadelphia to do a high school in Philadelphia.
Okay. When was the last time you've been in New York City? Is that?
I'm there every year. I go work in my elementary school to help the kids there.
Good for you.
Every year, I work with the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders.
So Harlem, Philadelphia.
Then Baltimore, Maryland.
Baltimore.
I leave Baltimore on the 8th for Chicago. And I'll be in Chicago for the 11th. And then on from Chicago to Toledo, Ohio, where I'll do 2 programs there. And then from Toledo, Ohio to Dallas, Texas. And then from Dallas to Austin, then back to Dallas, and then home.
Okay.
I was at Weaver, your local high school today. We had a great time.
Okay. Weaver High School is in my senatorial district.
We had a wonderful time at Weaver High School this morning. Wonderful time.
I'm happy to hear that.
Wonderful
and
time.
I'm sure, confident that the students at Weaver High School were edified by what you had to say and
well,
whatever it is that you shared with
I would encourage you to check in and find out for yourself, because we had a marvelous time. I spoke to the students as a whole, and then I spoke with the championship basketball team separately, one-on-one.
Yeah,
I was impressed, to say the least.
Yeah,
fine young people.
Weaver High School, the Weaver Beavers. This year's I think class LL state champion.
Yep.
So
yep. It says something about M division, something like that.
Class M.
Yeah,
state
Class
champions.
M.
Yeah. Okay.
And kudos to the coach and the couple of coaches that were in there, because that's a support system that young people have to succeed. And they don't get enough attention, enough recognition, because they're doing 3 jobs most of the time, 4 or 5 jobs sometimes. And
the coaching staff there deserves a lot of credit, because they worked with those young men. They went to the state finals for the last 3 years. The third time is apparently the charm.
Wow. I just want to make a point of it, because especially in our society today, African-American men are discounted. And oftentimes we're talked about as being absent, and it's not true. We're very present, right? And we're doing the work that doesn't get made popular on television. No one talks about those coaches or men like that in the community who are undergirding what's left, right? And I'm a product of men like that. So I didn't have a father, but there were other Black men there who counted and stood up and got in my way and made me pay attention. And so I was with those men today in that room.
Okay.
And I saw the fruit of their labor. And so for whoever's listening, if you know those coaches, let them know you care about them and you support them and you appreciate them.
Yep. I share some of the same experiences that you're talking about. My mother and father were separated for as long as I can remember. I was fortunate because I think I saw my father every weekend. And, every chance he got, he told me how much he loved me.
Beautiful.
So that was great.
Beautiful.
But I had similar experiences in that I played midget football and Little League baseball. And, I was a fairly good student. So I had teachers and coaches that were very supportive and helped to reinforce certain values and helped me to become the good person that I think I am. So, so working in concert with my mother, I owe those folks a great debt of gratitude.
Well, they did a fine job.
Well, that feeling is mutual. I think those that worked with you did a fine job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me tell you, it's been such a pleasure spending this time with you. The time goes by too quickly, I suppose, when you're having fun. But I thank you for stopping by.
Thank you.
And visiting with us.
Appreciate it, sir.
Mr. Robert Watts Jr.
Thank you, sir.
I'll be looking to see you again and to hear so much more about you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for joining us with this edition of the Senate Reports. I look to see you next time. Thank you.